It's summertime, and I know a lot of us are spending a lot more time outdoors, either entertaining, having friends or family over to hang out, or just wanting to be outside with the kids to get a little break from the indoors. So I absolutely love our new sofa that we got from Wayfair. We have it out on our deck. It's a little sectional sofa that looks so nice, and it's just a great space for us to relax once the kids are in bed or to hang out when they're playing outside. We love it for entertaining. We have our grill out there, so it really just makes the whole space feel more inviting and lets us have just a whole new, almost like room of our house where we can entertain and host people. I also love to shop at Wayfair because they have all different types of styles, but they also have all different budgets in mind, which makes it really, really nice to be able to choose something that looks great, but that also isn't going to totally break the bank. They've got everything you need for outdoor entertaining, from dining tables and sets, umbrellas, outdoor chairs, bar stools, grills, tableware, bar stuff, cushions, literally anything you can imagine. We're also very into our garden right now, so we've got lots of planters and accessories for our garden, which is so great. So you can try Wayfair too. You can shop outdoor furniture, grills, lawn games, and way more for way less, plus free shipping even on big stuff. So head to wayfair.com right now to explore their huge outdoor selection before summer's over. That's wayfair.com, WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. Welcome to No One Told Us, the podcast that tells the truth about parenting and talks about all the stuff you wish you knew before having kids. I'm your host, Rachael, and today I'm really, really excited to speak with Dr. Jessica Nurick. She's a PhD nutrition scientist, registered dietitian, and mom of two who's on a mission to cut through the noise around food, wellness, and parenting. On her Instagram, TikTok, and Substack, she breaks down complicated nutrition science, challenges misinformation, and offers thoughtful, evidence-based takes on everything from baby formula to nutrition. She's passionate about making science accessible, and she calls out fear-based messaging when she sees it. And I have loved watching your account just really take off. I mean, you've been growing and you've been so successful on social media for such a long time, but I feel like post-election and post-inauguration in particular, you've really just been going for it and going there. And I appreciate that so much. So thank you for coming to the podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So I did go a little bit into your credentials in the intro, but I would love to just hear a little bit more about your background and what kind of got you interested in the field that you're in the first place.
Sure. Yeah. So I have a PhD in nutrition science, and I'm a registered dietitian. And what my research trajectory was really in the prevention of chronic disease, mostly type 2 diabetes and cardiovascular disease. So looking at how nutrition, exercise, and other lifestyle strategies could mitigate or prevent some, or reduce risk, I should say, disease. And so that was kind of what I studied throughout my PhD. And then as a professor, I was a professor at the University of Nevada for a few years. And so that was really what got me really interested in that was a lot of things. I've been kind of like a lifelong athlete. Wellness has always been very important to me, living kind of like the healthiest lifestyle I can. And when I was a senior in high school, my grandfather, who was only in his 60s, he was kind of a young grandpa, he died of a heart attack, just a sudden heart attack while snow blowing. He had type 2 diabetes at the time, and it got me really interested in kind of how could we prevent or reduce risk of that, and definitely prevent it that early in life. And so that was, it really informed kind of my research trajectory later on when I was going through grad school. And yeah, that's kind of where I've worked and operated for the last kind of decade and a half. I've been very interested, what got me into this field was really like personal wellness and personal health. And I'm still very interested in that. But as I learned more and more, I realized how it's very important to kind of look at systems in the US as well, and in countries and states, and just the systems that we're all operating within, because while we make individual choices, those choices are made within systems. And so it really got me interested in more of the public health realm, and particularly looking at policy and how policy impacts our food environment and overall public health. So that's kind of what I've been focusing on social media for a little while. I was actually, when I got on social media, I started creating content in 2022, and I was pregnant with my daughter. And so that's what brought me to social media initially to start creating content, was because I was getting fed a lot of pregnancy, postpartum content, and a lot of it is misinformation, really targeting a vulnerable population population. And so I was like, well, let me go, I would see videos and be like, well, that's not accurate at all. So that's what brought me on, was to start kind of like combating some of that misinformation to help kind of like calm some parents. Cause I myself, I had really bad postpartum anxiety with my daughter, but I also just like knew how anxious that time period is, right? And we just want to do what's best for our baby. So that's what brought me onto social media. But my content has since evolved back towards mostly what my studies were about and what I've really focused on in my career.
Yeah, I love that. Everything that you said, I was just like nodding vigorously, because you're right. We see so much when we're pregnant, like the algorithms know, right? And we're fed so much garbage about everything. And it's so hard as a new mom, especially if you're anxious. It's so hard. And I have this theory that like all of these moms who are like super fired up about things like dyes and things like ingredients and vaccines and like all of those things, I have a theory that those moms run more anxious anyway. And they're like just on a constant alert, looking for threats everywhere and like just believing that there's threats everywhere. And I love that you call out the systems in place too, because I do think that, especially in our culture, like we're very individualistic and we've been fed all of these lies about like, oh, if you just take the right supplements and if you have the right diet and all of that, that you'll be good. But there's so much about our health that is systemic and that we should be doing and could be doing so much better here in the US compared to other places. So I love that you educate on that as well. You mentioned you started social media in 2022. And you were pregnant yourself at the time. So what are some of the biggest like hot topics that you focus on and that you feel like come up really often for that population, like that, pregnant through postpartum mom age or stage?
Yeah. So I think initially I was really focused on these like foods to avoid lists that we get so often in pregnancy because, a lot of it doesn't put anything in context, right? So they'll say just, a foods to avoid list. Really, people can take that to heart and they're like, I need to avoid all of these foods. And they don't really realize why they're avoiding it. And my first realization of why that was important was, I had started creating content and I got a DM from a woman who was terrified because she forgot she was pregnant, which I know sounds silly, but like it can happen.
Especially if it's your second or third. It really does just slip your mind.
So she wasn't even thinking, and she ate a sandwich, like a deli meat sandwich. Mm-hmm. And she was so concerned that she had like done damage to her baby. I think those were the words that she used. And it was because she didn't realize like why people say not to eat deli meat in pregnancy, right? And so she had no like kind of conceptual understanding of that it's just that deli meat can be a little bit higher risk in, having some of these pathogens that can cause foodborne illness. But that risk when put into context is very, very low. And you're likely fine if you have a deli meat sandwich. And so when I explained that to her and put the risk in context, it made her feel, a lot less anxious. And that's really my goal. And so, I think talking about food safety and talking about how we need to like kind of have food safety with all of our foods in pregnancy, not just like avoiding certain foods because, foodborne illness is actually more common in produce than animal foods. But for some reason, we only focus on animal foods when we have these lists. So those types of things. And then combating just some of the misinformation about some really important tests in pregnancy. Like, my area of focus was in diabetes, and I ran lots of OGTTs, oral glucose tolerance tests, throughout my PhD. And, we in pregnancy, we have to do the oral glucose we're advised to do the oral glucose tolerance test to screen and test for gestational diabetes. Our medical system isn't really set up well for medical professionals to explain in depth why we do this testing, why it's important, what the pros and cons are. And so I think just bringing that information helped a lot of people to be able to kind of like reduce their anxiety about the test because they would just see like all these terrible things on social media. So that sort of thing. Those are a couple of the big ones, but there's certainly a lot.
There's a lot. And I know you have talked a lot about formula safety and regulation. That was like a really hot topic on your page as well. Yeah. What can you tell us about like regulations regarding formula composition and safety in the US? And like, should parents actually be worried about this? Do they need to ship their formula from Europe for it to be good quality?
Yeah, so formula is one of the most highly regulated foods that we have in the United States. I mean, I don't know that a lot of people realize that. And so the ingredients in formula are there in order to best mimic what's in breast milk, right, to the best of its ability. A lot of times these videos that you see on social media, kind of fear-mongering formula, they'll take like one of those hypoallergenic formulas and they'll point out like individual kind of ingredients, or they'll look at the whole ingredient list and be like, why would you be feeding this to your baby, with no context, right? They don't put like the breast milk ingredient list next to it and see that it's just as long with just as many scary looking words. But there's a reason for each of those ingredients. So, I mean, we can just go over some of the high level, like big ones that are talked about a lot. The first is seed oils that are in formula, right? So seed oils which is a social media term. Like, we don't use that term in nutrition science. I actually had never heard of it until the last couple of years on social media. Yeah, we say vegetable oils or polyunsaturated fatty acids, or the specific oil we're talking about, like rapeseed oil or soybean oil or something like that. Right. But yeah, so these oils are used in infant formulas all around the world. There's this misconception that in the United States we're the only ones who use them. That you can't find an infant formula, at least I've never found one around the entire world that doesn't contain them, because they have a fatty acid profile that more strongly mimics breast milk when combined with the milk that is in the formula. So cow's milk has a very different fatty acid composition than human breast milk, and human breast milk is higher in polyunsaturated fatty acids. So you can't just use cow's milk for the fatty acid profile. You have to use that you can use it as a base, but then you have to add in more of these polyunsaturated fatty acids, and these seed oils contain kind of exactly what's needed in order to meet those needs for breast milk. So that's why they're used. And again, it's very highly regulated to make sure that those nutritional needs are what's needed for breast or for infants. I guess the other big one would be corn syrup. So oftentimes you'll see, these videos will show, again, they'll grab a hypoallergenic formula or one of these specialty formulas, and the first ingredient will be corn syrup. And it's like, why? First of all, I think there's a confusion that it's high fructose corn syrup. It's not. Those are different sugars. Corn syrup is nearly 100% glucose. And so the reason that it's used, well, first I should say the primary sugar in breast milk is lactose. That's the sugar that infants are getting, and they're getting a lot of it. If you've ever tasted breast milk, it's quite sweet. And so that's where that sugar is coming from. Lactose is glucose and galactose. Those are the two simple sugars that make lactose. Galactose is a milk sugar. Every single infant formula manufacturer in the United States makes a solely lactose-based formula. So you can go to any manufacturer and their main formula is going to be just lactose, no other sugars. Some specialty formulas which have to reduce or eliminate lactose for infants who can't tolerate, like milk, so they have a milk protein allergy, or they have galactosemia, which is a rare condition where they can't tolerate galactose. They need these specialty formulas that have a reduce or eliminate lactose. So if you do that, you have to have sugar from elsewhere. And if you can't have lactose, because you can't have the galactose, you have to use glucose, because glucose is pretty abundant in breast milk to form lactose. The only other sugar is fructose, and fructose is not well tolerated by infants, so it's not used like glucose is. So because corn syrup, you could use maltodextrin, all of those are complete, like mostly all glucose molecules, and that's why they're used in these specialty formulas. So I think just those types of explanations help people to kind of understand and help people make choices, right? So the vast majority of parents, if you're going to be a formula feeding parent, you can please start with a lactose-based formula, right? And every formula manufacturer has those. And then if there's issues, and then if you find out later on, you need a specialty formula, then you can make those decisions. But at least you know why you're making those decisions and why those formulas have corn syrup when you do.
Like you said, our doctors don't always have this kind of time to explain all of these things in depth to us. And so I think just hearing you talk through everything, it sounds like it makes so much sense. Are you concerned at all about like all of the cuts that are happening with RFK Jr. right now and how the safety of formula might be impacted? Or do you think it's okay for now?
Yeah, I'm very concerned. It's all speculation in terms of what could happen. But and we'll see. They have an advisory committee right now looking at infant formula, and there are updates that we need to make to infant formula. It's been a long time since, I think, the 90s, since we made some really important, nutrition updates, evidence-based nutrition updates, right? Like looking at the amount of DHA in formula and some of these other factors that we could be kind of mandating that need to be in formula or infant formula now. And I think that's great, and we should be doing those assessments. But again, It needs to be from an evidence-based perspective. So I hope that that's happening. And I hope that we are, not making silly choices like, oh, let's remove seed oils for some, just because social media tells us seed oils are bad, those types of things.
Yeah. So can we break that down a little bit? Because I have also been getting so much content about that over the last year or two. What is a seed oil and why do people think it's bad for us? And is there a better oil that we should use instead, or is it totally fine?
Well, better is relative, right? Because, so let's just go through all of that. So seed oils are the oil that is extracted from the seed, right? So sunflower seeds, safflower seeds, rape seeds, which is we call canola oil here. They call it rapeseed oil in other parts of the world. So it's just the oil from seeds. The way that it's extracted is what concerns people, because it's really hard to get oil out of the seed, and so it goes through this process, this processing of extraction, and that process certainly is you're not just squeezing the seed to get it out. So it's a pretty in-depth processing method, but there's from a nutrition science perspective, there's no real concern in the what you get out of it. There's a bit of a risk of oxidation because these polyunsaturated fats are at a higher risk of saturation versus something like a saturated fat, which don't oxidize as much. And so the storage technique is really important, is a bit more important for seed oils. But overall, scientific evidence is very clear that there's no concern when consuming seed oils. I think people don't realize that seed oils are consumed all around the world in abundance. Mm-hmm. A lot of these countries that we look to when we're comparing the United States health to other countries' health, like Japan, well, the number one oil used in Japan is canola oil, right? These countries are using these seed oils as well. So they're not the things to be concerned about in terms of our health. Now, when we talk about the best oil, seed oils are definitely not the most nutrient-dense oils, right? So if you're looking at an avocado oil or a coconut oil or I said olive oil, avocado oil. Okay. So those will retain some nutrients, right? So you're going to get also some nutrients with those oils. So when you're looking at just the oil next to each other, those are going to be more nutrient dense in terms of an oil, because seed oils go through such a processing method that they kind of lose all of that nutrition. So if you're an individual kind of making individual choices, you may want to choose an olive oil for your salad or something like that. But in terms of at a population level, if we look at seed oil intake, there's just not a concern in the nutrition science research. And in fact, when you look at data that looks at kind of swapping out saturated fats and putting in polyunsaturated fats, from things like seed oils, it actually is better in terms of heart health and all-cause mortality.
Wow. Okay. Well, there you go. There you have it. We're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, I love how you kind of show how you build a meal. And this just made me think of it when we were talking about oil. So we'll be right back. And I want to ask you about that. If there's one piece of advice I could give to new parents, it's to make your life as easy as possible. And one of the ways that I have liked to do that for the last several years since I became a mom is by using Thrive Market. Thrive Market is like your favorite health food store, but it's online and it's so much more affordable. And I'm talking premium brands like Primal Kitchen, Siete, Simple Mills. Everything's delivered right to your door and up to 30% less than what you'd pay at traditional stores. Everything that they sell is incredibly high quality and meets really high standards. They ban over 1,000 ingredients. I know lots of people are thinking about things like that right now. You can even filter by diet and preference. So things like gluten-free, low sugar, vegan. So you're not wasting time reading every single label at the grocery stores. I even stock up on some of my wellness favorites and pantry items, toothpaste. I love their diapers. Everything that they have has been so great for our family. I love it because I can get everything my family needs in one place, everything shipped directly to me, so it's one less thing that I have to think about and do throughout the week. You can also skip the junk without overspending if you head to thrivemarket.com/heysleepybaby. You'll get 30% off your first order and a free $60 gift. That's thrivemarket.com/heysleepybaby. thrivemarket.com/heysleepybaby. Summer is here, which means more sun, more light, and more time to do all the things that make summertime so special. And the number one thing you don't want to be doing all summer is spending hours cooking inside. That's where Factor comes in, because Factor's chef-crafted, dietitian-approved meals are ready in just 2 minutes, taking the hassle out of eating well, especially during summertime when we are all busy with activities and travel and just don't have as much time as we do when we're in our routine during the year. Factor meals are perfect because they arrive fresh and ready to eat, so they're perfect for any active lifestyle over summer and beyond. There are 45 weekly menu options, so you can pick a gourmet meal that fits your summer goals and your tastes, and you never get sick of them or bored. You can choose from all different options and filters like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, Keto, and more. And Factor really powers your day, sun up to sundown, because they are so nutritious, and they've got everything from breakfast, on-the-go lunches, premium dinners, and guilt-free snacks, and even desserts. So your whole day is totally covered. My husband and I absolutely love these meals. They are so, so delicious. We've never tried one we didn't like, and I am absolutely serious about that. So I would love for you to try it too. You can get started at factormeals.com/no-one-told-us-50 off. And you can use code no-one-told-us-50 off to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. One more time, that's code no-one-told-us-50 off at factormeals.com/no-one-told-us-50 off for 50% off your order plus free shipping. Factormeals.com/no-one-told-us-50 off. Okay, so Jessica, one of your passions is obviously wellness and nutrition and eating well. And I love, you posted a video a while ago where you kind of just showed how you build like a really great nutrient dense meal. You started with like, I think whatever veggies you have. Can you walk us through, like, it's a lot of just tired moms. We don't want to have to think about what to make for dinner. Can you just give us an idea of like what you would make as your go-to meal?
Yeah, I make a lot of stir fries. So, yeah, and I kind of call it like the anatomy of a meal. Mm-hmm. So essentially I'll just go into like my fridge and I take one to two vegetables, usually two, maybe even three, but whatever I have. So I do like shaved Brussels sprouts a lot, or I'll do like chopped up asparagus or spinach or something like that, right? And I saute that in a pan with some oil, whatever oil you want to use. I use a lot of avocado oil.
Fine, okay.
Yeah, sometimes vegetable oil. So you can saute that. And then I usually you can add in, like, while I'm doing that, I will make like a protein source, usually in my air fryer. And in like the summer, I use the air fryer a lot because I don't want to turn on the oven as much. But whatever, you can make it in the oven, you can make it in the air fryer. The air fryer is just a lot faster. So make that while, your stuff is sauteing. And then I usually add beans for like a little bit more fiber, because I'm a stickler about fiber. I think it's like really, over 90% of Americans aren't meeting fiber intake guidelines. And that can help a lot. Just kind of like focusing on fiber specifically. So yeah, I'll add some beans for fiber. And then, you just choose a sauce. So like a lot of times I'll use pesto, like store-bought pesto from like Costco, or like a pasta sauce, or I'll do like a soy sauce with a little bit of chili sauce, like depending on the flavor profile I want. And then I'll add, you can add some like sort of carbohydrate if you want, if you want a bit more calories. So I'll add like rice or noodles or something, oftentimes rice. And then you add your sauce in there. And then when the protein's done, you just put the protein on top, and it's like something you don't even have to think about. So yeah, I make it often. And there's so many variations to it.
I was going to say, I feel like that's like always our go-to meal. And it's something that our kids will eat every single time, is like some rice, some marinated chicken, and a veggie or some salad. I want to come back and ask you about what your kids eat too. But you also just mentioned something about fiber, which I think is so important, because I think there's like this huge obsession right now with eating enough protein, which I am assuming is a good thing, but I think people are kind of maybe like over fixating on protein and not enough on vegetables and fiber. Can you explain some other benefits of increasing our fiber intake and how we can do that?
Oh yeah. So, I mean, it's one of the best things that you could do for your health is just make sure you're meeting your fiber intake guidelines. That's 25 grams per day for women and like 38 grams per day for men under 50. And then it drops a little bit. But if you actually go through and you kind of count up the number of grams of fiber you're getting per day, it's probably nowhere near those numbers. And I eat probably double of what that recommendation is. But also don't do that if you're eating a low amount of fiber right now, because you really want to start like gradually increasing your fiber. But yeah, so I mean, it can help from a digestive perspective. Fiber is the food for the microbiome, so it can help with digestion of other nutrients too. It can help to keep your microbiome quite healthy. It can help, soluble fiber can help with cholesterol levels and blood glucose regulation. I mean, there's just like a lot of health benefits of fiber overall. And it just, I've heard from so many people who, I'm constantly on social media trying to remind people to eat more fiber. And I get a lot of DMs that are like, oh my gosh, since I started thinking about it, like I just never thought about fiber. As you said, they'll be like, I was so focused on protein and I never even considered fiber. And now that I've added fiber back to my like diet, I feel so much better. So, they have more energy, they just feel better. So if you're focused on protein, that's good, but like also focus on fiber, right? Like if you're going to hit two goals, those are two goals to hit.
Okay, amazing. And so fiber, I mean, this sounds like such a stupid question, but like what are your go-to fiber sources? Like beans, vegetables?
Yeah. That's not a stupid question at all. Okay. I mean, yeah. Most people aren't studying like what nutrients are in specific foods. So things like meats and proteins, there's no fiber in those, right? So fiber comes from plant sources. So you're looking at things like beans and vegetables and fruits, like kiwi is pretty good. I think apples are pretty good, but those are your biggest. Lentils. And then, there's a lot of like functional foods that contain fiber too, right? So you can buy like high fiber, if you're not eating enough like vegetables and beans and such, like high fiber tortillas, I'll buy sometimes. And, if I'm like low, I can just like do that exact same thing I said, like the anatomy of a meal, but like throw it in a tortilla and throw some salsa on top. Yeah. I do that quite often for lunch. So yeah, there's high fiber cereals and, whole grains contain fiber. Right. So yeah, if you're just eating a lot of these like whole-based plant foods, it's pretty easy to hit those numbers.
Okay, amazing. And so your anatomy of a meal, are your kids eating that? Your kids are 2.5 and how old is your other one?
5.
You have one of each. Oh, okay. Yep. So how are they eating? Are they eating the exact same thing as you? Do you make them separate meals? What is your kind of like family eating routine?
Yeah, so they eat the same thing as me for dinner. Because that's kind of like when we eat together. Mm-hmm. And if we're eating, like if I'm making food for lunch, they'll eat the same thing as me. I'm lucky in the sense that neither of them are like me, like I was when I was a kid, where I didn't want any food touching like anything.
Yeah, that's tough. Yeah.
So that's how I was. Like if anything was mixed, I was not eating it, which is hilarious because I eat all my food mixed now. But so like my daughter loves like rice, beans, and even like air fried tofu. That's like her favorite meal. So she eats a lot of that. I'll just make them like a lot of like, like a meat or a protein source. Mm-hmm. Sometimes like they won't eat potatoes, but they'll eat French fries. So like if I slice the fries and then air fry them, they'll eat those. They eat a lot of fruit. If I'm, I use those like frozen mixed veggies a lot because they love those. And so, I mean, like that's what my go-to for them for vegetables. They'll always eat broccoli if I make that, but those mixed veggies are like definitely like a go-to. It's like a safe food, right? They're always going to eat it, which is nice. I just throw like a little bit of salt on there. Yeah. And then like breakfast, we do a lot of Greek yogurt, an English muffin with a little like peanut butter, eggs, although my son's going through an I hate eggs stage. So we're not doing that as much, but he'll eat like a hard boiled egg.
So that's probably not a problem.
Kind of works out. Yeah. But oftentimes they're eating the same thing I am. I mean, now don't get me wrong. We have the occasional chicken nugget, right? Course, and I'm not really partaking in the chicken nuggets, but like I'll make them even like mac and cheese and chicken nuggets every once in a while, especially if like they have friends here or whatever. But for the most part, they're eating similarly to what I make.
Okay, I love that. And I think it's so refreshing too, because I think a big part of like the wellness culture and the mommy influencer culture over the last few years can make it really stressful to figure out what to feed your kids. And you're just constantly hearing about all of these like quote unquote toxic ingredients and toxic foods and all these things that you shouldn't be giving your kids. And it can make it really, really hard. We're going to talk a little bit more about that kind of misinformation when we get back from this break. We'll be right back.
Breaking up is never easy. But saying goodbye to your old clunky work tools? Well, that's easy. Just repeat after me. It's not me, it's definitely you. You rigid, unfriendly software. It's time to freshen things up with Monday.com, the first work platform you'll love to use. With stunning dashboards, customizable templates, and built-in AI that actually works, switching to a new work platform has never felt this good. So move on to Monday.com.
With the Venmo debit card, you can Venmo everything. Your favorite band's merch? You can Venmo this. Or their next show? You can Venmo that. Visit Venmo.me/debit to learn more. The Venmo MasterCard is issued by the Bancorp Bank N.A. pursuant to license by MasterCard International Incorporated. Card may be used everywhere MasterCard is accepted. Venmo purchase restrictions apply.
We're back with Dr. Jessica, and I'm really excited to talk to you about this next topic because this is something that you have been very vocal about over the last few months and that I think so many more people need to hear, because a lot of the, quote unquote crunchy moms, they're really just trying to do their best and like raise healthy kids, right? But I think there's this idea of like the perfect mom being all natural, no epidural, no formula, no using plastic, no using processed foods, all of that kind of stuff. How do you see this as being harmful in the parents that you talk to?
Yeah, I think it sets up kind of an unrealistic expectation of us as moms who are living and functioning in 2025, right? I had 2 unmedicated births at a birth center, so I was in this world. I kind of understand, and like I said, like I identify as like very wellness oriented, right? I just like to distinguish between kind of the fear-based wellness versus like the evidence-based wellness where we're really focusing on, whole foods as much as possible and sleep and stress reduction and, moving your body and getting outside in the sunshine. I think that's all wonderful and something that I'm all about. It's when it turns to like fear around everything. And again, there's a conversation to be had about like some of these food additives, our GRAS system, like all of these things, but like within context, whereas a lot of social media, because what plays really well to social media algorithms is fear-based conspiratorial content. Mm-hmm. And so it kind of takes a little bit of a truth and it blows it up to be something that's not even any resemblance of truth anymore, to scare the heck out of people, right? And particularly vulnerable populations. And what is that population? Well, new moms are a huge one because it's not just about keeping us healthy anymore. It's about keeping our kids healthy. And so we just want to do what's best for our children. And so, there's this like anxiety that we have. And I even, with everything that I know in my like years and years of science education, like I even would be like get into the wrong algorithm and be like, oh my gosh, and like question myself. So if I'm doing that, like I know that, most of us are, right? And so I try really hard to push back on what I call predatory wellness, which is this like fear-based marketing to then turn around and sell you a product that's oftentimes an unregulated product that, hasn't gone through a lot of safety testing, that doesn't have the same FDA oversight that our foods and our pharmaceuticals do, which I'm not sure that a lot of people realize.
It's also so funny to me when people bring up like big pharma and big food as if like big wellness isn't also a multi-billion-dollar industry that like lots of people are also profiting from. It's like they're not all out here doing this for free.
Making millions, some of these wellness influencers. And it's like people think they're like brave and like
doing it out of the kindness of their heart.
Yeah.
It's like we laugh about it, but you do get sucked in. Like you said, even if you think you know better, you do get sucked in sometimes. And some of these people are very sneaky in how they sell to you, right? And it can be really hard. So how do you recommend parents discern like credible nutrition information from more misleading content when they're on places like Instagram or TikTok?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things to look for. So I think if people are using really inflammatory language, like I've done some videos on like women will come on and be like, "Are you poisoning your kids?" Yep. And then they go on to talk about like an ingredient in something, right? Like that's probably not an evidence-based person coming to talk to you, right? Because like that we really don't talk like that in science. We're not like, are you poisoning your kids? And then,
because water
misrepresent.
could be poison. Like water can be toxic in a certain dose. So yeah.
Correct. And so this particular one that I'm thinking of, it was looking at like trisodium phosphate in a cereal. And then they went over to Home Depot and showed like trisodium phosphate cleaning solution.
I saw this.
And so, you can do that with water as well. Like water you drink, and then you can go over to Home Depot, I think I used the example of like sodium bicarbonate, which we all have in our pantry to bake with, right? But you can also go over to Home Depot and it's there as a cleaning agent. So that's just kind of like a misrepresentation of chemistry. And so what they're doing is, again, they're taking like a little bit of truth and then they're kind of misrepresenting kind of the what it means, right? And how scary it actually is. So I think looking for that inflammatory language is a red flag. Looking for people who aren't putting things in context. So, if they're saying like, this is linked to cancer, but they're not telling you in what dose. That's my first question. In what dose is that linked to cancer? In what model? Is it in a rat at like 50% of their body weight? Because that is not applicable to us. So if they're not kind of like talking about that and kind of the particulars there, water is linked to drownings. But, that doesn't mean water is unsafe, right? So putting it into context, like I kind of talked about at the beginning with like food safety, right? Like, well, okay, so you say that like deli meat's unsafe, how much more unsafe? And put it into context, and that can really help you to then make an informed decision, right? Without context, you're just scared to eat anything because you don't know okay, if everything's linked to cancer, then I'm scared to eat. What can I eat, right? So again, context really matters. Find people who are putting things in context. Find people who are, citing what they're saying. This can get a little tricky because people tend to take scientific articles and just kind of like put them on the bottom and know that nobody's going to actually read them, and then it gives them credibility. Oftentimes when I see some people do this, I'll go and read the article, and it doesn't actually say what they're saying that it says. But it's good to kind of like see somebody who's or look for people who are referencing what they say. If they're quoting a study, if they're saying something like studies say, but then they never show like what the study like what studies are talking about, that can be that can be problematic. So I think it's always just helpful to be like skeptical. Like I welcome the content that I make. I welcome people to question me on it, right? I welcome people to fact check it, and then we can have a conversation about what they found. Oftentimes they're asking ChatGPT, and ChatGPT can often be wrong. Sometimes can be wrong, but I'm actually like encouraged that it when people do that, because it means that they're trying to think critically about these things. So I think it's just good to not take people at face value and to make sure that they're backing up what they say.
And I see a lot people kind of coming at you with these like red herring fallacy arguments too, and they try to spin it or trick you, or I don't know what they think they're doing, but they'll be like, oh, so you don't actually think that we should be improving our food supply, or like, oh, you think it's just fine that we use different standards than Europe, or they kind of try to like divert from the argument a lot too, instead of actually engaging in like a good faith back and forth discussion. I always feel like that's like a major red flag too, because of course you want the food to be safe. Like, why wouldn't you? But
yeah, food dyes is a really good example of that, right? Like forever and a day, I have recommended that we consume less ultra-processed food, less of these high sugar, nutrient-devoid ultra-processed foods. I should be specific because there's some, protein powder is an ultra-processed food. So there's some variation within that definition. But, I'm not pro food dye, because food dyes are used as a marketing tool in these ultra processed foods for food corporations, to, market to children essentially. And so they're used in like Skittles and those types of things that like we ultimately should be consuming less of. And if we remove those artificial dyes, it actually potentially could be a good thing, because it might help to reduce the consumption of these ultra processed foods, right? Because the kids won't be as like drawn to more muted colors. Now, I'm not sure if that would happen. I've never seen data on that, but just like intuitively, I would think that might happen. But that doesn't mean that like we can just make up statements about food dyes, and we all should go along with the made up science because we all want the same thing, which is less consumption of these ultra processed foods and these food dyes essentially, right? So I will correct information that's saying these are banned in all other countries and America is allowing us to use them and poison our children, which is just absolutely inaccurate. And they're actually all scientific safety assessments in the EU and Canada and Australia have all deemed the main dyes that we use in the United States safe. They're all approved for use in those countries. And so when people are saying they're banned elsewhere, it's just not accurate. So when I will correct that, people will, I will inevitably get, as you're saying, people being like, why are you so pro food dye? And it's that, I don't really know how to help people understand that that's not the case. No. I feel like we need to go back to like logic class.
Right.
But
you're just pro facts and like
I'm
pro accuracy.
I'm pro accuracy, right? And I'm pro, and I don't think that a lot of people realize that narrative is intentional to erode trust in science, erode trust in regulatory authorities. And so it's not benign. And so it's very important to correct that misinformation because that's not why America allows them. America allows them just like, the FDA allows them, just like the EFSA allows them, just like Health Canada allows them. The difference is that they don't have as much demand for them in other countries, right? Like corporations here under a capitalist economy make what people demand. And so people are buying these, bright cereals here. And if they mute them, they see a drop in sales or they see people complain that they look dull, which happened with General Mills. And so when people buy them, that's what these corporations are making. So if there's a demand for these like more muted colors, which we may be seeing now, we'll see if it, a lot of times I think a lot of the most outspoken voices about this aren't actually the people who are purchasing these products.
Exactly. Like these wellness influencers aren't buying their kids Fruit
They're
Loops
not buying
in the first
Fruit
place.
Loops.
So like what? I don't get it. Like why do they care so much about this one thing?
Yeah, and it's interesting because it's like it's positioned that we don't have choice here. Like there is, especially for people, and we can talk about this more like systemically where they're, but for the people who are the loudest in this movement, they have as much choice as they want. They can go to Aldi, they can go to Trader Joe's who don't have these synthetic food dyes. They can even go to like their Kroger where there's options like you can either choose Fruit Loops or Fruitful O's, which is like the option with more muted dyes, right? Or the natural dyes. So it's like we have all of these choices here in the US right now. They'll compare like Fruit Loops to Fruit Loops in Canada, but like you could compare Fruit Loops to Fruitful O's here in the US. We have that choice already right here. Yeah. So I think that's an interesting thing.
That whole thing is very interesting to me too, because they don't seem to care as much about the populations in food deserts or, people that are low income and the people that really don't have that much choice. They don't seem to be as loud fighting for systemic changes that would help those people, which I just find very interesting.
Well, and I'll tell you, I understand it a little bit. So before I went to get an education in this field, I didn't really think about food deserts either because I didn't know those existed. Right. And so I knew kind of like what I knew. I was like, okay, well, I'm going to exercise every day and I'm going to eat this. So I think that a lot of people in this movement kind of who haven't really studied public health and who haven't studied, and this is not a knock, like this is just an area of study that some people go to, right? Like I don't know all the ins and outs of economics because I've never studied that. So I think that people who haven't really thought through like these systemic issues in America and why our food supply is the way that it is and studied public health, they don't think about those things as much, right? Because they don't even realize that food insecurity is as common as it is, and almost 14% of the country live in food insecure households, right? They don't realize that millions of people live in these food deserts where, I've heard from people doing simulations, like dietitians who have to go through simulations and try to help people in these food deserts try to go and get fresh food. And it takes them 2 hours on different buses to get to and from a grocery store. And a lot of people are like, how could that happen in America? Well, there's millions of people living in situations like these food deserts where it's very difficult to get access to fresh fruits and vegetables. And so if you have never had to kind of like think through those issues, what you're most concerned about is what affects you. So it's like, okay, well, I, have my family and I'm trying to keep them healthy, but they go to a birthday party and they, have a cookie with red dye 40. So what's important to me is to remove red dye 40 from the food supply so that my kids are never exposed to it, and so I understand to a certain extent why some people are most concerned about that. So that's why I think it's really important to get people to realize kind of this bigger picture that it's like if we're actually worried about public health in the United States, we're worried about everybody's health. You have to look at the people who are most impacted by chronic disease. If you want to cite the statistics about chronic disease in this country, and you have to be willing to apply it to everyone, because those are the statistics you're pulling from, is everyone in the country. You're not just pulling from, your upper middle class neighborhood that's probably doing fine from a health perspective. And so we have to look at how are we going to help improve the health of Americans? And that's not as, admittedly, it's not as flashy to talk about. It's not as exciting for most people because we're really concerned about our own health. And I understand that. I'm getting a little in the weeds here, but I just think that it's really important for people who have kind of studied these areas to explain why it's so important. Why when we're trying to tackle chronic disease in the United States, we really need to focus on low-income populations who are most afflicted by these chronic diseases, right? By these lifestyle, chronic diseases that are impacted by lifestyle. I just want to clarify there. And so what kind of things can help those people? And that's things like enhanced nutrition access with SNAP, right? That's things like enhanced healthcare access with Medicaid, addressing food deserts, bringing local food systems back. So when we make a list from a public health perspective to improve the health of Americans, those are the things that are top of that list. And then artificial food dyes, which have not been shown in the literature to be a huge public health concern and are approved for use all around the world, aren't high on that list. And so that's, I think, where the disconnect is from a public health perspective versus what I want to see in my individual life. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense. And I think that disconnect is why there's a lot of fraught. It seems like there's a lot of tension and, like you said, a lot of mistrust between the general public and the scientific community, which is so unfortunate. So I really do appreciate your content so much because you do such an amazing job breaking down all of these things and explaining why we should care about certain things and why other things are maybe not necessarily a top priority for everyone when we're speaking about making America healthy again, which again is also really interesting to me, but that's a tale for another time. Yeah. I appreciate you so much, Dr. Jessica. Where can people find you and connect with you and get your amazing content?
Thank you. I'm on Instagram mostly and Substack. Those are my two main platforms. So it's Dr. Jessica Nurick on Instagram. I don't really know what it is on Substack, but if you just type my name and type Substack, it'll pop right up.
We'll link it for everyone to make it super easy for them to find you.
Thank you.
I appreciate you so much. One question I always end with is just more personal, and it's what do you wish someone had told you about before you became a parent that you didn't know or that you just weren't prepared for?
Oh, that's a good question. I think, what do I wish? I feel like so many people told me stuff, so I was pretty prepared. I guess for me, it would be having my second, maybe before I had my second, I didn't realize how much I would miss my firstborn. That was probably the thing that was hardest for me because I was so used to, my daughter's 3 years older than my son. So for 3 years, it was just me and him and I got to give him all the attention. And then all of a sudden, I had this other baby and, I really, in the beginning, I didn't have a lot of time with him. And so I was just and even still, I've never gotten that time back because now there's two of them, right? But in the early days, what helped the most for that, I had a good friend tell me, just take 10 minutes of the day. And that's your in the early days, right? When you're just consumed in the newborn life. And that's your dedicated time with your firstborn. Just take him to his room, take him outside, wherever it is. And that really did help me because I didn't do it for maybe the first month. And I was crying every day, oh my God, I'm never going to be with my son again.
I know.
And that helped.
That's really good advice. Yeah, I think that's a super common. We say that all the time too, my husband and I, how we regret how we divided and conquered so much when the second was born because he missed out on time with the newborn and I missed out on time with our son. And yeah, that can be really hard. So I love that advice of the 10 minutes. That's great. Thanks so much again for joining. This conversation is going to be so helpful for so many people. And I highly, highly recommend everybody follow your accounts for more. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Life is a workout, and Smoothie King is here to help you power through. Whether you're grinding out bicep curls or muscling the couch across the living room, crushing morning miles, or sprinting through back-to-back meetings, Smoothie King has fuel to help you maximize your workouts, own your recovery, and elevate your game. Give your body the energy, protein, and power it needs with a lineup of delicious smoothies made to help you conquer your goals. Only at Smoothie King.